You're listening to the Place Northwest podcast, your digital resource for the latest insight and analysis on all things property in the northwest of England.
Hello, and welcome to the Place Northwest podcast. My name is Julia Hatmaker, and I'm the Deputy Editor of Place Northwest. Today, we're discussing the Building Safety Bill, which is a game changer for the construction industry in the UK. Not sure what is in the Building Safety Bill and what it means for your company? You're not alone. The Federation of Master Builders found that 52% of builders were not yet prepared or aware of the changes from the bill. But do not fear, because we have two Building Safety Bill experts today to guide us through what the bill is, how it came to be, and what it means for the construction industry. Joining me are Alan Robson and Max Meadows of Project 4. Project 4 offers specialist safety advice on a multitude of safety-related issues, including CDM compliance and, of course, fire safety. I have to say, I feel like we're in really good hands too, because you guys have been doing presentations breaking down the bill for months now. How many have you done, Max?
I'd say hundreds.
A lot.
Do you think, Alan?
Yeah.
Probably hundreds.
Definitely in the hundreds.
Yeah, and it probably, it started in draft form. It was just to get clients ahead of the game. We didn't even have a draft bill when we first started it. So it's been a long, drawn-out process. We've had to update the presentation a lot. We've worked closely with clients to almost develop a bit of a management system and an approach to this bill. But obviously, we're in a position now, and good timing today, where we've got royal assent on the bill. So we know exactly where we are. We know what we've got to work to. We've got a timeline to go ahead. And I'm guessing a lot more presentations to do off the back of royal assent.
Probably some more reading. We've done lots and lots of reading over the last couple of years. So we must be into, if not hundreds, nearly thousands of pages worth of reading. So part of our job is to cut out all the crap and sort of condense down what we need to give to clients. So hopefully today is a start for that if people aren't too up to speed.
Yeah, and I'm glad you guys mentioned that. So we're recording this on April 28th. So royal assent has been given to the bill sooner than I think a lot of us expected. So let's just start out with the basics. How did the Building Safety Bill come to be? Alan, why don't you start us off on that?
Okay. I think there's been building up for many years, and there's been a number of tragedies within the construction industry, but within sort of assets. I mean, the main one, which we won't go into in great detail, but was Grenfell back in June 2017. And then, there's been a number of incidents before then and since then as well. So off the back of Grenfell, virtually straight away, July, the month after, Dame Judith Hackett, who used to head up the Health and Safety Executive, was commissioned to undertake an independent review, which, keeping it short because it was a very, very long report. She drove a bus through the industry.
Yeah.
And ripped it to bits, basically. And as proud as we all are in this room, probably of the construction industry, it's quite damning, really, what came out of that report. So, moving on to the positives, there's some sort of key points that came out of that, which we'll talk about today, and that's really been the driver for the change. And there's been various sound bites that came out from the inquiry, which is still ongoing, I believe.
Definitely, yeah. I think as well, one big thing is Dame Judith Hackett, her report was issued in May 2018, and we were thinking, right, this bill's going to become live now. Obviously, we've had Brexit and we've had COVID since then, so there's been a real delay to the bill. And as a result of that, the industry has been in limbo, really. People's insurances have gone up. No one knows what to do on projects or managing buildings. So there's been a real sort of delay to getting going. And hopefully today we can move things forward.
So I guess with that kind of in mind, what are the big changes that we need to know that the bill's putting into place? I know there's quite a few. So if you don't mind starting.
There's a lot. And actually, sometimes we go in and do these sessions for clients, and it can be quite overwhelming, and people can go away sort of quite negative and their heads baffled. So there's quite a lot of change, and I think ultimately the bill is the sort of overarching sort of high level piece of legislation. If anything, certainly for ourselves, that what's going to impact us and individual duty holders under CDM, but within the construction industry, is the subordinate legislation, which again now we've got Royal Ascent on the bill. We will see more detail coming forward in the next sort of couple of months and years. And I think before we fully realise or become to appreciate the bill, we're probably 3, 4, 5 years away from that. So supposed to get into what the real sort of changes are.
I suppose the headline is construction and design and operations of buildings. We've almost been left to regulate ourselves in certain parts, and there hasn't been much stringent overview with regards to fire safety. Now this bill introduces that, particularly for high-rise buildings, so buildings over 18 metres. There's going to be real stringent thorough processes to get things signed off to build and occupy buildings. But that's just the headlines. This bill applies to all buildings. It's not just high-rise resi. There's massive changes to come with competence, how you approach buildings, how you manage information, how you keep residents safe and sort of run that through. So it's a sweeping change to how we design, occupy and construct buildings.
And I think that's important just to labour that point is this, and this is the feedback we get from the industry. We work UK-wide and we spend a lot of time in London and Birmingham and we speak to various architects or clients or other duty holders, and the first thing is, well, we don't do residential and we don't do high-rise, and I think there's a real sort of misconception. Okay, high-rise buildings are the priority in the short term, but the bill and its subordinate legislation will impact to all parts of construction. I think during the conference that we attended a couple of weeks back, where Dame Judith Hackett spoke, I think she picked up on something like 57 high-level points in her report. Don't hold me to that number, but the overarching one being competence, which is going to be huge. That's almost going to be separate from it, although it'll fall under the bill. There's going to be a huge exercise just on the competence requirements. So, I think there's...
Okay, so I guess on competence, when you guys say that word, what does it mean in the context of the bill?
Well, now they actually split out competence. I suppose competence was an old term. Now they say skills, knowledge, experience, and how you behave on a project. Because one of the things that was picked up in the Hackett report was people's behaviour. There was a lot of people saying, that's not my job, I don't do that. So it's almost an approach now to put your hand up if something's not right. The skills, knowledge and experience are quite easy to demonstrate. Behaviours not so much. So there's a thorough look of how you are competent. To support that now, there's going to be an architect's registration board that you've got to actually sign up to and prove that you're competent. Also, what we do know is to hand over a high-rise residential construction project, you'll have to provide a competence declaration. So to say, this is how the team are competent, this is how I've checked them, and we're competent to design this building and hand it over. So big sweeping changes and something that we're working with clients to do, really.
I mean, one of the key things that came out from the conference, which I found really interesting actually, is that Dame Judith Hackett and her sort of steering committee that pulled the report together looked at other industries. So not just construction, they actually looked at the food industry and the oil and gas industry, and looked at what they've done when they've had sort of, major tragedies, and they've learned from them before, where construction, it's almost became acceptable. And I think there was some sort of statistic or content that came out from government to say that they actually expect a tragedy every sort of 8 to 10 years. So, which is just crazy to think that in the food and oil and gas industry. So they've gone away and they've really sort of dug deep, not just within construction, but looked at other sectors. So there's been a hell of a lot of work that's gone on in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So,
well, one thing they said, which was interesting on the oil and gas side, is they take a system approach to each process. And they said, when looking at construction, we basically start from scratch every project. Every job looks different. It's a total new team. There's all different processes. So there was a real push from that side of the industry to say to construction, why don't you approach one system? Apply the same thing to a multitude of projects. So there might be a bit of a push for modular building off the back of this, that sort of same approach for every job. So sweeping changes probably coming on that side as well.
And we see a lot as well, going back to competence or SCET or SCEB as we call it, that the skills, knowledge, experience and behaviour is actually, with lots of different professions under CDM and within construction, particularly with what we do, is if you can sell yourself right, anyone can set themselves up as a PD or as a CDM advisor. Is actually now is you've got to demonstrate our capability, which we've been doing for a number of years. So Yeah, competence, capability is going to be big.
It seems like to me another huge aspect of this bill is the need for, beyond just accountability, but also having this golden thread, that whole concept of like having a record of almost everything. And it seems like there's several different gateways so you can come into a project. Is that right? Max, yeah.
Definitely. And the way, I suppose, off the back of the meeting we went down to in London, Dame Julia Hatmaker basically said, you're not only buying a building, you're buying the data behind that building. And that's sometimes lost, really, because, the management of information is very poor. There's a load of gaps when you get that handover information. So now it is a requirement to have that record information via the golden thread in live and electronic format. So really, a lot of people aren't getting that at the moment. And what we do know is you're going to need handover information a lot earlier on a project. At the moment, we're going through a bit of a trial run on a project down south, aren't we, Alan? And a lot of contractors just aren't used to that. We're saying you need handover information a month before the job hands over. It's causing mayhem, really, isn't it?
And this is the sort of historic problems around CDM, which was introduced in '94. And very much became a box ticking exercise. It was, people were allowed to work 100 foot in the air, but as long as an F10 or a piece of paper was filled in, then everything would be fine. So I think there's a lot of myths around construction, particularly CDM. And for us, certainly we've been changing the last couple of years is getting health and safety file, soon to be the fire and emergency file needs to be started from day one. So we're capturing designers' information at pre-construction. And I think that's where, diving away from the building safety bill for a little while, but, it will overlap with the bill massively is under CDM. There's a very much sort of, the focus was very much on construction, whereas actually that CDM was introduced to capture design risks and apply principles of prevention and the hierarchy of control at the front end. So when we're handing over to the building or the whatever procurement process we go through, that we're reducing the risks and the hazards, not just during construction, but during the operational side of a building. Quite often we're on live projects and the access, cleaning and maintenance strategy hasn't even been considered. It's just been the plant's on the roof or we don't know how we're going to replace the windows, that kind of thing. So that's now going to apply even more so to the wider aspects of fire safety as well.
Now, when it comes to fire safety, you guys mentioned, you touched on this at least before, you have to have someone and have that kind of plan in place, like in the pre-planning stage, correct? Like that's as early as you need to hop in on this.
Definitely, yeah. Well, look, initially that came in last year as part of the building safety bill. So there's a requirement now to include a fire statement before you build a high-rise residential project. So that was a bit of a surprise, wasn't it, when it came in last August? A lot of people didn't see that. It's a new addition to the basically construction project, and it's a bit of a different approach.
I think these gateways that and again, it's introducing that process is now it's gonna introduce fundamental change, and I think that's where we're not here to scaremonger today, but if that's going to help the industry sit up and listen, if organisations don't get their ship in order now, it is going to cause delays within construction. That's inevitable, isn't it?
Well, you won't be able to hand over projects. That is the statement. If you don't have this information, we won't let you progress to construction phase. We won't let you hand over the project. And we're telling that to clients, and it hasn't really took hold yet. A lot of people are saying, oh, well, it's not live yet, the bill. We'll pick up on it in the future. This is a bill that can be acted retrospectively. So you need to get basically your ducks in a row now.
So wait, what kind of information are we talking about?
So definitely bringing the fire engineer to your design review process. So a lot of what we do during the design phase is, if there are massive design changes, we're undertaking a review of information. Why is that design change gone through? We're working alongside fire engineers very closely to do that. We mentioned tracking the golden thread. You've got to have a live record of information. Clients don't really buy into that. So, they normally wait for the contractors to come on board to get that in place. It's a requirement for the client to manage that now. So you need an online system to manage all the building information. You need to check that your team's competent. How can you demonstrate that? A lot of the time we'll get asked to check if a team is competent once they're appointed. So you can't really do anything then if you say, one, they're not competent, where do we fill that gap? And what we are doing now is we're working very closely with the people who are going to occupy the building during the construction phase. We're telling them this is what we've built the building to do. This is what we've allowed for. Sort of a much more of a softer handover process. So then before they occupy the building, we can say, here's all your handover information and you're good to go. And then you can get sign off from the building regulator. That is a total new approach in construction. Everything is sort of maybe done a bit last minute in other areas.
I mean, the health and safety file has been the bane of our lives as the construction industry, because it's just a complete paper chase where actually no one sees any value in it, which is just crazy. So I think, certainly what we've been doing the last couple of years, which will tie in with the bill, is from a hazard and risk management point of view, is trying to restore some credibility into these registers that we use, because usually, I'm being completely honest, it's just usually generic crap and generic hazards that don't really add any value. And normally when we receive them, we either put them in the bin or more so now being, to sort of collaborate with people is have one-to-ones with designers and the wider sort of project teams to explain what we need, what is design risk management, because I don't think as an industry we fully understand it. So certainly for ourselves now, the hazard and risk register, we're trying to capture fire safety specific hazards. What can we do now? Can we capture that now? And I think there are things we can start to do from now that we've been doing for probably 2 or 3 years that will get us ready for the bill from when it becomes fully implemented.
Right.
I think something that's coming out of London, which might spread to the wider areas of the country, is with fire safety, a lot of people just try and do the basics. It's what can we get away with? How many residential properties can we get into one building? How much can we get away with? The approach needs to change to how can we make the building safer? Like most design processes we go through, you've got to try and aim to make the building as safe as possible, offer suitable means to get people out the building safely. So there's a big change coming from the fire service and their sort of input into the design process.
But I think also there's a huge, and again, not dissimilar to CDM 2015, is there's an educational exercise needed here, which, something we do as part of our role now, whether it's on a project appointment, supporting to, educate and upskill design teams. There's going to be an education piece on this just so that people can fully appreciate. And I suppose the last point on that is this isn't about just fire engineers and getting fire engineers involved, although that will be part of it, is actually the competence and the understanding, the skills, the knowledge and behaviour of everyone around the table, as opposed to just going, oh, well, the fire engineer sorts that out. So it's more about that. It's not just about fire engineers.
Yeah, the term used by Julia Hatmaker is you can't hide behind the fire engineer. Everyone needs to take ownership of anything they're putting into the building. So there's sweeping changes on that side, isn't there?
Now, Alan, let me know if I've gotten this right, but it's not just that you have to have this kind of thread and documentation of the building and changes in pre-planning and pre-construction. It's also when the building's operational as well, correct?
Correct, yeah. Well, that's one of the fundamental changes that's come out today, really, or has been talked about the last couple of weeks, where there was supposed to be the introduction of an accountable person.
Building safety manager. So the building safety manager role was due to start. It was a requirement for every building over 18 metres. That's been a change and took out of the bill, which we found out today. So now those duties sit with the accountable person, which is probably a person overseeing, maybe 5-10 buildings. The previous requirement was to have one for every building. So a bit of a sort of dilution of the bill, which is, a bit of a shame maybe.
Well, the noises from Dame Julia Hatmaker at the conferences, she was writing to government to stress her concerns over that. They've obviously gone against that. We are where we are, so yeah. It's still evolving.
But I guess that one person, even though they're overseeing 5 buildings, they still need to maintain that kind of documentation of any changes that get made and proof that they don't endanger the safety of the building, correct?
Definitely, yeah.
Absolutely.
And, a lot of the time when we've briefed, particularly social housing groups on the bill, they're quite worried with that because they're looking at that and saying, how do we have the resource to get all that information? We don't have the money to manage this. So there's a bit of a gap there in the industry and probably a bit of a skill shortage, but it's a new requirement. We're working closely with a lot of clients to sort of pull that information together. But bit of a dilution, which is a shame to say.
But I think it's maybe going down the route, whether it's around self-regulation, but what was talked a lot about at the conference, which I found really interesting, is this isn't just about the regulation. Regulation alone isn't going to change the industry. It's going to be very much about leadership, about organisations, individuals embracing change. Regulation, we could sit here and thrash it out for probably for days, if certainly hours. That you could say CDM's failed for the since '94 and '07. It was changed in '15. We're certainly seeing some improvements, but still lots of misunderstanding. So it's very much about the industry now. For us, it's the construction industry embracing that change, as opposed to saying, "Oh God, here we go. We're going to have to do this again. We're going to have to." It's very much about we need change if we're going to save lives further down the line.
Yeah, and then speaking, in a more practical sense, and beyond just like saving lives, the idea that it could be implemented retroactively, like you really do need to be on it now, because even if those parts of the bill aren't being put into place like by this summer, they take like a couple more years, you need to have that done. So when do we think that the bill will be totally implemented? Is there any thought on that?
So now you've got a 12 to 18 month introductory period. The headlines of that are the first 12 months is setting up the grounds for the bill. Who's going to manage it? This new joint combined authority or building safety regulator. They're going to police everything, design, construction, operation. There's a lot of residence panels which are going to be set up. There's an architect's registration panel, which you'll have to apply to as an architect and say, this is how I'm competent. So there's a lot of setting up to do in the first 12 months. Back end, the final 6 months, so 18 months from now, is the business end of the introduction. That's when the gateway points, the final points come in. That's when the golden thread comes in. That's when literally you're going to have to have all this information to hand over a high-rise resi building comes in, and the retrospective policing. What we are seeing, and I suppose most of the questions in Parliament are, how much resource is this building regulator going to have to manage and monitor this? And we think most of their time will be spent policing old buildings as opposed to new. There's so many old historic buildings which probably don't comply. Their time is going to be spent looking backwards and saying, how can we help social housing? How can we get these where they need to be? So it's a bit of a grey area on resource and capacity at the minute, but you've got 18 months to get sorted, basically.
That doesn't feel like enough time.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got 18 months to get our ducks in a row, but during that time, we need to be doing a lot, obviously. So what is Project 4 doing to help out the industry?
Lots.
Yeah.
Threw me on my toes there. Obviously we've started, and this is a hell of a journey we've been on. I think during the lockdown, I think we were kept very occupied when we had nothing to do. We were doing lots of reading, so that wasn't too bad. We're now, we've been doing briefing sessions for probably over 2 years. Yep. We're now at the stage where we are doing, we've done some test projects, both in the Northwest and down in London. We're now at the stage where we're producing action plans for clients. And maybe Max will give you some more details on that. We're doing more bespoke briefings, because I think now as the talk's done, we've got to start to deliver. One thing for ourselves, and this is something that again came out of the conference, is that there's two main drivers for change that will help change, or the tools for change they were saying is one is the Building a Safer Future Charter, the BSF Charter, which we're helping a tier 1 contractor with down in London. That, just to put it in perspective, is probably going to take about 12 months from start to finish to get through this charter, which you could call it an accreditation. I don't think accreditation is the right answer. The charter, when it was first introduced and was presented to Dame Judith Hackett, was almost kiboshed, wasn't it? Yeah. And it was scrapped because I think it was almost going down the same route as the safety schemes and procurement, which can sometimes often be seen as a tick in the box and there's quick wins there. We pay a fee, we give them some information, we get a badge to stick on our website. I think the BSF chart is going to be there's going to be a lot more work. It's going to be ongoing, it's going to be continuous, and it's really aimed at driving change. So that, again, there's got to be a real commitment there to do that, and that's it's not going to be for everyone, but I think it's we've got to push that, we've got to promote that. And the other one, which again we're still doing a lot of research on this and pulling together some sort of briefing sessions, is the Code for Construction Product Information, the CCPI, which again I think was going to sit, it's certainly going to be an important part within the golden thread. So I don't know if you want to talk about what you're doing specifically on live projects.
Yeah, definitely. So for some time now, on every project which we're on, we've been delivering a bit of a briefing session to say, and basically to the project team, listen guys, here's what you need to do. here's what you need to be aware of. And for about, I'd say, 6 to 12 months, we've been issuing action plans. But those action plans are based on, draft legislation. So it's included things like the building safety manager. Now that role's gone, so we'll have to go again. So there's been a big focus on trying to get ahead of the game, working to what we know now. That's been a big push on a project level. Now, I suppose we've got clear and guidance to go off. A lot of clients are asking us, what does an appointment look like for a designer, a contractor? How can we help with that? What does competence look like? So we're doing a lot of competency assessments. What does the handover process look like and that management of information? So we're working closely with a lot of clients to sort of assist them with that. That is being all piled for a lot of clients into a bit of a management system to say, this is your building safety bill, handbook or Bible or whatever you want to call it. So we've got a lot of meetings over the next couple of weeks to sort of sit down and agree that and tie it in with clients' processes. But again, we've probably got a lot of reading still, haven't we, off the back of this?
I think we're looking at what we do from a CDM point of view, whether it's client side, architect or principal contractor, is even though we are delivering projects, we are actively involved in projects as part of that service or that scope. It's educational and upskilling. So offering support, whether it be a sort of one-to-one basis or briefings to the teams, but I think that will continue as it has done for CDM. So very much an educational role in making sure everyone's aware, looking at what they do. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of detail to come. And I think, that certainly from the subordinate legislation, this is going to be an evolving wheel for the next couple of years. So, certainly education is going to be the big thing for us, and more briefing sessions.
And I guess the important thing here is the note that you cannot ignore this.
No, absolutely not. I mean, we're not here to preach, but we need to get stuck into this now. And that's what we I think I've said it already on this podcast, but we're speaking to guys, right across the UK who are saying, well, we'll look at it once it's in. And we were already in phase 1 of the bill. Now we've got real assent today. Things are going to start to happen. We still have a little bit of time, but now is the time to start moving things forward. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so to sum up what I've learned today is that the building safety bill, I have to pay attention to it now. I've got to start implementing things ASAP. It could be sent in retroactively, but the big takeaways as to what I need to know about this bill is that it's going to require a lot of paperwork and digital paperwork, just kind of explaining changes that have been made, documenting them, and proving that they are not going to endanger the fire safety of the building. I need to also make sure that my design team and everyone involved in the project has some level of competence, that they understand, what they do and how it relates to fire safety. All right, still getting nods?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay. And then a lot of it's about accountability and making sure that, everyone takes responsibility for their role in the project and what that could mean. And that there might be further regulation in the future. Do I?
Potentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're on the right line.
Did I miss anything?
For larger organisations, we are seeing, individual appointments made for people, or departments even to track this, the building safety bill. And I think it will create roles with, for larger organisations. For the smaller ones, regardless, we need to start, looking towards what we need to do. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, that's a wrap.
Nice.
Thanks, Alan and Max, for joining me on the podcast. And if you want to learn more about Project 4, head to project4safety.com. And for the latest news and analysis on the property market in the Northwest and North Wales, be sure to subscribe to Place Northwest podcasts, as well as our daily newsletter, which you can find on placenorthwest.co.uk. I'm Julia Hatmaker. Thanks for listening.